AI is obviously changing how we work, but it's also changing the way that criminals work. Scams are becoming harder to spot. I don't know if you find this as well. Fake emails, fake voices, fake messages, uh, you know, content that's generated with AI. And it's really hard to distinguish now between what's real and what's fake and what's not, and to spot that elusive sort of telltale sign. And it can make clients question, what is real and who they can trust, obviously. So the question is not, how can we use AI? I think we also need to start asking, how do we use AI without putting client trust, client data, and our businesses at risk? And I think an even bigger question is, how do we help our clients do the same thing? That's really important. But that's what we're going to get into today.
Welcome to PROpulsion, the weekly show for financial planners and advisors who want to build better, more successful businesses. I'm your host, Francois du Toit, and every week we dive into the practical strategies that matter, from growing your client base and improving your services to developing yourself and your team. Whether you're running your own practice or you're part of a larger firm, you are guaranteed to find actionable insights to help your business thrive. So with that, welcome, and let's get into today's episode.
So Nevashan Pillay joins me today to help us make sense of the growing link between AI, cybersecurity, and financial advice. Nevashan has more than 20 years of experience across financial services, insurance, digital change, operations, technology, regulatory change, and large transformation projects. More recently, he has been involved in AI agent workflows, next generation ERP platforms, and cyber insurance product development. That's a bunch of words saying that Nevashan has experience. He's seen a lot, and he's still going to see a lot, but he has seen a lot, more than us probably combined. But that's what all of that tells me. What I value about Nevashan's perspective is that he's not looking at AI only as a tool or cybersecurity only. He also sees the bigger picture. How does it change the risk? How risk affects trust? And what businesses need to do to stay relevant and responsible. So on that note, Nevashan, a warm welcome to PROpulsion Live.
Morning. Good morning, Francois, and your listeners. Thank you for having me on the show today.
It's a pleasure. It's lucky to see you. This has been in the works for a while, so I want to get to the point. We've got about 35 minutes or so. I think first of all, like I'm even getting to that point when I hear the word AI, I'm already a bit hurtful, but it's one of those things that's not going away. And then also cybersecurity, when we hear these two things, I think a lot of people might think, oh man, this is for my IT people, or this is for like technical, this is beyond me, all of those kinds of things. But why do you believe that this has now become a business and a client trust issue for advisors, and not only that it's no longer just an IT thing?
Yeah, thank you, Francois, for that question. I think, we've traditionally seen IT as the IT guy's issue, right? But you find that whenever there's money involved and clients' funds and those kind of things, you're going to get many people, criminals out there trying to attack that. We've seen what's happening most recently with South Africa rising up the ranks from a country that's one of the most hacked and penetrated countries. So with cyber attacks happening every day, we've seen the land bank having a massive issue in terms of full denial of service attacks at the beginning of this year. I think the Standard Bank issues have been widely populated. But it's also not just targeted at that level, right? It's happening down to the advisor level, where you've got your independent firms, your smaller type firms that are increasingly being attacked. So with AI presents a massive opportunity for firms to fundamentally rewrite how they provide advice, the quality of service to customers, really creating delightful experience, building that trust. But with that trust, cybersecurity threats are becoming so more advanced that it's up to the firm and the advisor to understand in depth how they're going to not just comply with legislation, but put out the controls that are necessary in place to protect themselves from cybersecurity loss, cybersecurity attacks. I think the regulators also placing a lot more onerous requirements for the advisor to do that. So it's a business issue. It's not just the IT guy's issue. It comes to the front and center of how you as an advisor create trust with your clients, and how you build value out of that. You wouldn't leave the door opened when you walk into the office in the morning. From the same perspective, you should be fully positioned and understand how the security threats are going to attack you or potentially attack you, and how you need to guard yourself against that. But also not be scared and hesitant to move into the era of how AI can fully transform and improve how we give financial advice and how we treat customers.
One of the things, Nevashan, that I think is obviously hard for like particularly small businesses. As you said, what we're seeing is that it's not only the banks that get targeted and the big corporates with like lots of data and lots of money and all of that. It's actually that everyday businesses, small business are getting targeted. I think year on year, January to this year to last year, there's been a 36% increase in these attacks just in South Africa. I'm not talking about globally, but in South Africa. It's crazy to sort of think about that, but like all of these things comes with costs, right? And I see this across the board with small businesses. You sort of I need Microsoft Office, and I'm not going to take a business license. I'm going to take a family license, or a personal license, something like that, because it's cheaper. So there's a lot of cost pressures on us, but we don't necessarily understand the impact of making those kinds of decisions. Either going for a what is the word, like not a commercial, a like a consumer version of the product versus a business version of the product. So can you just talk maybe a little bit about that, like just from how we think about this point of view, like what are we missing, and what are the risks that is now come about as additional risk because of AI, and why is it that this is one of those things that I guess my question is, how do we cope with this from a cost point of view? And yeah, hopefully you get my question. I don't know, my brain is over, like it's so busy.
No, Francois. Thank you. I'll step in there. Dealing with large enterprise customers is very different from dealing with small firms, SME type companies. But over the last year, we've been doing a lot of work with advisory practices, accounting firms, etc. And you see the practical realities. Like you mentioned, you go in to get Microsoft licenses, and you want to buy the family version because it's cheaper, and you think, the expenses start stacking up, and you get cybersecurity expenses, Microsoft expenses, cloud costs also been rising. I think one of the things we're seeing with AI solutions in cybersecurity is that they're also democratizing in terms of cost for the small practice to implement. So your selection of tooling needs to be more deliberately curated. And I'll put this in very simple language. So whereas before you go in and get a family account and you start running the emails, and I can go get a Gmail account and run that, your selection of choices now needs to become a lot more deliberate, right? And it doesn't necessarily translate into expensive. Okay, so it's a multifaceted answer, right? Your staff need to be trained, so people are not sending stuff from Gmail accounts to each other. We're not printing stuff and leaving it in the desk and leaving it in the cupboard and it goes out in the trash can. So the tooling choices become really important. Fortunately, your big MSP players like your Microsofts, like your cybersecurity vendors, are there to help you to curate all the different facets that you need to ensure that you're secure. So if you get a business license from Microsoft, you're covered from about 70% of the risks. If you add a good, world-class cybersecurity protection solution onto that, you're now sitting at 80 to 90%. The balance then sits with your controls, right? Now, if you're opening a free ChatGPT account and uploading your client financials and their data, and you're asking it to give you analysis on that data in a free account, that's not the right decision to make, So there's a framework that we built to help practices understand. It's like a 5-point scale of things that I need to put in place to ensure that I'm comprehensively covered, or at least doing the best. You will never be fully protected, so let's also get that out of the way. Like we've seen with the big guys, the attacks still happen, and they happen because the types of attacks are becoming more sophisticated, more aggressive, and they're targeting down the chain to the smaller firms. So I found that a few controls are good enough to get you past regulatory clearance, because if something should happen, or sometimes the guys also say when I do get hacked, not if, all I need to do is be able to put my hand up in front of the judge or the regulator to show I've had the following controls in place. And those are quite clear, and we can help our clients navigate that space.
Thanks for that, Nevashan. I think it is. Let me just take a step back. Like you were mentioning, like there's this increasing number of attacks and types of attacks. Like, are there any type of attacks that you've noticed that are happening more and more, or is it still the big ones, the phishing and the ransomware, and or are there different new things that we need to be looking out for from a small business point of view?
Phishing is still the biggest one because it looks so real, right? You get the phishing emails a lot more polished, lot more personalized. There was a guy who literally thought his colleague in 2 offices away is the guy who was sending him the email, because the email name, Bob Fenter, came about. The email looked the same. He didn't pick up a single letter was slightly misspelt. Criminals are using that to really impersonate your clients on both sides, right? So you're being attacked in many different ways. When I say sophistication is improving, criminals are impersonating your clients. They're impersonating your advisor. It's harder to identify where those are coming from. Then there's the element, you asked me, in addition to the standard ones, deep fakes are becoming a reality, right? We've seen content where you can look at world leaders embracing each other, event that didn't happen. We look at voice content where I can clone Francois's voice, call my client and say, hey Ben, how are you doing today? That thing we were talking about last time, you didn't send me the financials. Can I please have that? You know what, our email servers are down. Can you please send it to this address? Thanks, Ben. And yeah, let's do that golf session we thought we'd have next week. That's a really good conversation. It sounds real, sounds honest. It's with Francois's voice. I had a legitimate issue. My email servers went down. Can you send it to alternative address? These are real things that have happened to micro, small, medium-sized firms, and really been incredible. So those are the extent to which the attacks are building upon, whereas it was just basic phishing. Like I said, the deep fakes are taking a big effect into that. And then accidentally leaking data, into public AI tools is the biggest one. Putting data on a cloud thing. Someone says, here's my Dropbox account. Can you send it out to me? Dropbox is pretty secure. I've got the paid version. The moment the data leaves your organization, you don't have control about it. But if you hold your client's data in that, ID numbers, bank account statements, etc., you're accountable for that. So criminals are learning. It's no more the Nigerian email scam. They're becoming a lot more clever, impersonating all around. And I don't mean to be specific, but those are the things that plagued us in the last decade. Now the attacks come from all around the world. It used to be Eastern Europe, and so they're really getting quite crazy right now.
Yeah, and
I think the speaker before me also spoke about the false sense of urgency. I think those things are triggers, So as an advisor, and we'll talk about this later in the show as well, you should always have a guide. A good example is to, a relationship with the client is important, but letting your clients know how you typically engage with them and your style is really important. So when you get that urgent email, when the client gets that, we will never ask you to respond to X. We will never ask you to WhatsApp this document to us. We will never ask you to send it to your Gmail address. So those are protocols you can put in place, as these attacks become more sophisticated.
Yeah, it's because that was sort of my maybe part of my next question is just around, we our business have always been a trust-based business. And we've got so much going on that we need to try and manage, and we need to try and be as effective as possible and efficient as possible and productive as possible. And we use technology to help a great deal with that. It's one of the things that we use. But now this very technology that can really help us, get ahead again, is also the thing that is used by other actors in order to break down trust. Really, so it's not, apart from the harm that they cause, like when they steal the money or when they get whatever that they do,
Mhm.
they basically erode the trust that we built with our clients. So I was just thinking, as you were saying, like, I would confirm with clients, this is the way we do it. We never do it. Like, the banks are constantly sending. Like, I've got accounts with Capitec and with FNB and Standard Bank, and they all continuously send, we will never do this, we will never ask that. And they send emails and SMSs and things like that. And we should do the same. I don't know how many people who's here who listen, like, do we send out things to clients to remind, to tell them? And I think probably, Nevashan, the biggest thing we can do is to educate our client. That could be, because it's about protecting them. It's not just between them and us. It's like, what are they dealing with on a daily basis? And I think we can also help them manage that through bringing these kinds of things to their attention.
Absolutely. You mentioned actors, right? And that's a really important statement because you need to understand your ecosystem, right? And I refer to the ecosystem because that's what it's spreading to become, right? Your firm is an ecosystem. You, as the owner of your firm, have a role. Your staff who execute tasks every day have a role to play in that, and that's collectively the firm. There's your client, and then there's outside third parties, your bank, service providers, product houses, etc., trying to reach you. I think being very deliberate about how you curate and understand the ecosystem is really important. Understanding the rules of engagement. So, like I said, a simple protocol sheet, we will never engage on the following. We won't ask you on WhatsApp emails. Your clients knowing who the approved staff in your business are, who the approved email addresses are, or even creating info at or support at or accounts at for different purposes. Really, really important. So those are only steps that you can take to advance it. Francois, I often like to make cybersecurity risk similar to physical security, right? I mean, like I said, you won't leave the door opened. You'll make sure you have an electric fence. Did someone put the alarm on? We have the protocol. We don't write down the alarm code and leave it in the corner. You'll be amazed how many officers actually have passwords written down and they keep it somewhere or in the filing room, etc., on someone's desk, or a Word document lying open on your feet. So, there's those things that you need to do to ensure that the controls are in place, and that you've got the minimum standards in place. Because, like I said, if or when you do get hacked, and the investigation does take place, and there's a whole incident management response team, the rules of the regulatory framework is quite clear. It asks you, did you have the following things in place? And the answer should be yes most of the time, but it then becomes negligent upon you should you not have those minimum things in place. So like I said, there are good frameworks about that help you. It's literally a 5-point check. Does my client know me? Do they know who to contact? Do they know how I prefer to engage with them? Do I know the ecosystem of the people that I engage with, from my client to their bank to the other product houses, and how we curate that information through that ecosystem?
What types of clients do you think are most vulnerable or most exposed or most likely to fall for these kinds of things? Are there particular types of clients, or is it everyone today? Like, maybe just your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it's everybody. But if you're looking, I've got aging parents, right? And the amount of times that, and not just parents, uncles, aunts, etc. I think that population group seems to be really highly penetrated in the mid to small sector, right? Like I said, we've got the large banks, enterprise companies, people sitting with pension funds, people in retirement positions, getting support. I was at Vodacom to change my phone the other day. Sorry, I shouldn't mention the company. But, there was a lady sitting there quite honestly saying, I've got this information on my phone. How do I get this? Can you send me your ID document? All the information that she needs with the financials. Or let me open my WhatsApp. I saved my bank account as a contact in my phone. I saved my password as a contact in my phone. Those are the realities of the situation that we're dealing with. And there are ways to protect around it. But I think if you look at the groups of people, no one group is isolated or excluded. we're seeing a lot more attacks happening for those who are in that age of either pension, retirement, a little bit less digitally savvy, may I say is a better word. So people don't know how to fully use and enable the technology. The people who wouldn't confirm that it's Francois' email address with the entire spelling, that it's .co.za, not .co dot something else, as an example. So we're seeing that group being highly vulnerable, but it's really across the scale. I think people trying to impersonate clients being one of the biggest threats that we're seeing now to the deepfake piece that I mentioned. Yeah, those two groups in the kind of job you find as an advisor, you're dealing with a kind of 30-year-old. He's a lot more savvy. He's got encryption on his phone. He does those things. But yeah, so segment your client base and understand how to manage those risks accordingly, because we're seeing it across the scale.
I want to say something now, right? I think there's a perception that the 30-year-old is much more technically with it. They're not. They are social media savvy. I'm telling you today, they are not technology. I'm not talking about people who are in tech. Like, they are obviously extremely tech savvy, but like the rest of them, they do social and scrolling. And I say that with a lot of respect. But that's it. Like, I don't think from what I'm seeing, like, they are so technically like sharp with all these
Savvy.
things as well. So they might be able to spot certain things and be able to see those kinds of things, but whether they have all the protections in place and set up everything the way it should be set up, I still think, like, they don't, because we get a phone that doesn't even have a manual anymore. And you start using it, and you use the 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 features that you always use, and there you go. You never spend time to really see, how do I change my security settings? Like, there's a couple of people who I've seen specifically on YouTube that are extremely, like, whenever there's a new Apple update coming out, they go, these are the 3 settings you have to change immediately. And like, so there are definitely people who are very much on that. But I think, yeah, the younger generation they grew up in a different world. It's not so much that they are necessarily thinking always privacy, security. They think convenience. They think, like those kinds of things. I don't know. I'm just some thoughts on that. Just my opinion. But I mean, do you have any views?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I think every group is a target population. That from a cybersecurity perspective, you train from that perspective. And Franz are absolutely right. I'm not just saying the elderly pensions, but that's where attackers seem to focus their high interest. People with money, people who are easy to scam, etc. So any 35-year-old clicking on a link is absolutely a risk. So, there are those, like I mentioned, those things that you need to put in place to ensure that your device is protected, because mobile devices are high entry points into your personal affairs. We use them a lot more than we use our laptops or our devices. But that does not mean you need to have device protection and not protection over your laptop. Like, you need to also lock away physical documentation in place. So yeah, absolutely. I think with the advancement, I'd go through a list of types of attacks, but the advanced nature of attacks is really penetrating everybody. From kids who have access. In large organizations, you also got this thing called privileged access management. Who holds the password? Who has the keys? Like I mentioned, don't put your data into a saved contact on your cell phone or your mobile device. So all those are becoming entry points. And like I said, with the attacks becoming a lot more advanced, they're trying to enter you from clicking on a link from social media to how can we get your documentation through your cloud, through attacking and penetrating your password. So it really is becoming multifaceted.
Let's bring it a little bit into the advice practice itself.
Mm.
Wash a little bit more into the business. Because everybody's using AI, like most people are using AI, if not everybody, but everybody's at least started to dabble. In the beginning, when we did training, we asked, like, have you used it? Like, most people went, like, well, a lot of people went, no, not yet. And then the rest said we dabbled. Now we've moved away from, I haven't, like, everybody's tried it. Like, nobody's really saying to us anymore that, no, I haven't looked at it yet, but I know I should. None of that is happening anymore. So it's really started something that to take hold, I would say, or that people are looking into. But where are we creating risk in our practices when we start using these these AI tools if we don't have clear rules?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you spoke about the experimentation phase, and I think over the last year we were probably in the experimentation phase. With now moving more directly and deliberately into more specific kinds of tooling. So when I said the experimental phase, people were going to ChatGPT, playing around with it. Oh, this looks really cool, etc. Let me put some documentation in there. Oh wow, I get a great response. Help me write a response email to a client. Fantastic, right? Um, where the usage becomes, borders on risk and borders on irresponsible is your GPT account free? Because then have you configured your settings to ensure that the model is not trained based on your data or your data is not being uploaded? I think those are key minimum standards that need to be addressed. So people realize they need to secure their AI accounts. They need to be very clear about, what's deliberate negligence versus am I pasting my client's policy documents and ID numbers, etc., into those accounts. So having a paid account first, I think, is an entry point. I think understanding what data you're going to put into the AI tools then borders definitely on negligence if you're uploading um, into a free account client financials and data. So there's ways to work around that. Like I mentioned, there will be AI tools. There are AI tools that are helping financial advisors very well, thriving, etc., safe, secure. So move to those spaces. Look at where you've got approved use of systems. Um, and the like. Does it help you?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the broader question is also maybe what should we be putting in place before even ourselves and but particularly our
Sure.
staff start using AI? What should we have in place?
Yeah, I think that's really important. We're doing a lot of work around training with teams to understand that they know firstly what is AI, how do I need to use it, etc. But for a simple firm, right? I think we spoke clearly now about paid accounts versus open accounts. Paid accounts is really important. Understanding how to leverage and use the AI, not just pasting in financials. Um, if you're going to do that, what is it trying to generate for the client? How am I using the data back to the client? Is an audit trail of what was generated, approved, or sent becomes really important. I'm a bigger fan for driving customer experience, which AI is definitely going to do in the advice world, but training your staff and people how to not expose your client's financial information, because it creates a privacy, a POPIA risk, right? And you'll be held accountable for that stuff. So I think training staff is really important. Understanding how we, as a firm, we're going to rotate to using AI tooling to help financial advice, and there are specific tools that help you do that, rather than your generic accounts or your generic types of tools. So I would really be a fan in favor of that. And then, as a firm, having a few protocols or practices in place for, is it client communication? Is it helping us assess and analyze client financial data? And if so, how are we protecting and how does the tool that we've chosen protect that financial data that we've ingested into it? So that you manage your reputational risk, manage your client risk, and you're not also providing, the other thing, Francois, is AI hallucinations, outputs that are not accurate, especially when you're giving advice. You run the risk of having not just confidential information be exposed, but also giving the wrong types of advice if you don't use the tool properly. That's another entirely segment I'd like to unpack, because advisors just assuming the AI is going to do something and give you an output. You still have to have the human in the loop to ensure that the outputs are fairly effective and good. So you can manage risk through inputs and understanding effective, fair use of tooling and systems, but you can also really shift the dial in terms of quality of advice by being deliberate about how you choose to generate the content, how you choose to review, etc., how you ensure there's a human in the loop, how you do an audit trail of what is generated and improved for that.
Yeah, and so something that's quite just as a add-on to the conversation is so I'm in the process of writing a white paper on the big LLMs and looking at
Yeah,
how they align with our regulatory requirements. So, phase, Kofi, the privacy stuff and all of that.
yeah,
And one of the things that I think we never think about, because why I'm talking about this now is because you were speaking about the audit trail and that you're able to see like where did this come from, can you track it back, etc. because ultimately the user is responsible, right? It's not the system or the tool. But what is important is that we are supposed to keep records of everything, right? So the conversations, the quotes, the recommendations, the applications, everything. That includes now, in my opinion, I'm not a legal person, but in my opinion, it includes the chat from the LLM. So I'm busy. Let's say I have a project, or I have an agent, or a chat within inside Copilot, for example. That whole chat should also be kept in your CRM. And I think that it's not supposed to sit there in that environment. So that's the one part about, like, are we keeping all of this whole conversation of everything that we've done, so that we can go back and say, this is what we did, this is what we shared, this is how we sort of do that. And then I think the other part, that's probably something, a conversation I had with someone yesterday about, is the fact that a lot of people prompt once and take whatever they get. They don't really work with it further. So, that's also a problem, which is not necessarily a cyber issue, but this is now more on the other end of things. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that before I ask you the next question.
Yeah, look, I'll start from the last part and go backwards. I think prompt engineering, the other work and advice we give to a lot of firms who are looking to use AI and are successfully using AI, both either an advisory perspective, from an accounting perspective, even legal firms, is how to prompt. Really the art of prompting is asking better questions and getting better answers. So being comprehensively trained and training yourself and your team in how to extract the maximum value out of AI is really important. But then having those protocols in place, like did I put the client's ID number in that document, or did I desensitize that? Always verifying those outputs and reviewing them so you have the human in the loop. An approved list of use cases, I think, is really important for how your firm's going to do that. How you're going to ensure that if you have an exposure, or if you need to account for how you use the client's data, you can show fair, responsible use, aligned to Kofi, aligned to Papia, etc. For that. I think there are definitely also prohibited use cases that you should try and stay away from until such time as the tooling and solutions allow you to do that, and until such time as the regulatory bodies also allow for different types of work with AI and the advisor in space together. So there are those that you can absolutely use, and I mentioned advice practices that are really thriving in the stage of AI, but not training staff on what AI risks are. Impersonation, phishing, suspicious content from a cyber perspective, but also types and use of data that should not also go there. It varies on, it bounces on almost a responsibility at a point in time, because the regulator won't take the fact that digital literacy is a challenge. They will hold you accountable from a license perspective. So I think those are a simple set of tools that you can have in place to do that. I think where it's going to get complicated, Francois, to the other points about working your AI, being deliberate about your choice of AI tools, because we're seeing what's happening with GPT versus Claude versus other platforms that are coming about. Like Kimi AI is also really big, coming out of China. Um, we're talking about data sovereignty, right? So each AI tool is going to take a certain path. If it's not based on-prem, or it's not a sovereign type AI, they're also going to have risk and implications for your data, where the data sits, and the types of narratives you create out of that data. So I think a starting point would be, do I have a cybersecurity and an AI framework in place for how our practice is going to do that? Listing the types of data we're going to use, a selected set of LLMs or a selected LLM, and understanding what's behind that LLM. Those become vendors and partners. The AI is effectively going to be a partner to you, like you hire a staff member, or like you hire an agency that you're going to use, or like you select a product provider that you're going to sell the product out to your clients. Your AI choice of tooling becomes really important to understand what's behind that. How is my data used? How is my client information managed? And then you mentioned integration with CRM platforms and the like. Absolutely. We look focused heavily on ERP, cybersecurity, and AI. And I say ERP because that's the core of your system. Now, ERP for the non-technical users are enterprise resource planning systems, which basically is like Toronto, your CRM system, your invoicing, your accounting, your billing, all the operations of where you manage your client data and your transactions. using AIs that are friendly to your ERP is better than ingesting from one system, taking it out, copying and pasting it into another platform. So integration platforms versus using your API keys, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit technical. Those integration points help to ensure the unified protection of your data in that ecosystem.
Yeah, and those things doesn't have to be complicated setups and all sorts of
No,
things, right? If you've got the right
no.
set of tools that can work together, it does simplify things. I want to ask one quick question before I ask you where can people get started, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what you offer. But just a quick question, just around, and literally like in a minute, Nevashan, just passwords, multi-factor authentication, those kinds of things. I think everybody's struggling, and we're all using the same password everywhere, because we try and remember the damn thing. so,
Absolutely.
so maybe just some advice around those two aspects as well.
So you're talking about controls that a typical firm would need to go through, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just like I have all these websites and usernames and passwords where I log in. How do I manage that? Because there's obviously a risk in me having a password that I can remember and then use that password for everything. Like all the sites have got the same
Sure.
password, right? Yeah.
Sure. Look. I still maintain it's a combination of things, right? It's never just going to be one thing. The kind of 5 point framework I mentioned too, but let's go around that. I think from a password protection perspective, um, try not to write it down and keep it on the laptop. If you're going to write it down, make sure it's as safe on in the digital world as it is in your physical world, right? So that should be in a safe first and foremost. But if you're not doing that, and I don't suggest you do that, password management tools are really, 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 really strong and work really well. There's lots, I won't be product specific, but there are a lot of good password protection management tools that help you manage a variety of passwords. And then, being clever and savvy because you need to treat your data as if it's your money, right? You need to ensure that if you're keeping money in your house under your bed or in a safe, that you've got a really good password for that. You protect it really well. You just not don't just have a password on the safe. You've locked the door. You've got the trailer door in place. You've got the dog outside. You've got the electric fence. So those are multi layers of authentication and a mindset you need to think about when dealing with your data, right? So different date, not one password that can unlock everything. Having multiple passwords is great, and having a way for managing them, you have to be really savvy about that. And I mentioned this password managed tools. I think mapping where your client's data is, if you're an advisor firm, right, which most of I think your clients are, and the firms that you do, mapping where the data is stored on emails, on laptops, on WhatsApps, on cloud drives, CRM systems, and how those are integrated becomes really important. It may sound complex, from such an early point, it's actually not. There are an ecosystem of systems, two or three or four that play nicely with each other. Great choices, moving there. You're now 90% secure as opposed to getting very disparate platforms, managing the integration between them. We don't live in that world anymore. So a good ecosystem of systems is really important. So mapping your client data, where they're stored between each of those is really important. And then also critical systems, having strong passwords, right? You mentioned multi-factor authentication. Your phone probably travels with you a lot, so MFA should be a mandatory thing that you do. MFA or two-factor authentication for the viewers out there is literally getting someone's logging into your account, or like you've seen, most of the banks have implemented MFA. As you log in, you get your cell phone device notification. You go to your cell phone and you ensure that you approve. Every transaction gets approved. Really, really good practice to have, right? Pay special attention to email, right? Because it's often an entry point for cybercrime. It's often an entry point for people trying to orchestrate and curate fancy cyber attacks on you by trying to break down the trust thing, trying to build trust with you. The verification process next for sensitive instructions. If you're using private wealth managers or private bankers, instructions to change bank details, instructions for withdrawals or transactions, it becomes really, really, really important. Training of staff, right? I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, including the admin staff. Do we have copies of ID documents lying at the printer? Or we printed it out, we filed it, we didn't file it, it's lying in the second drawer. How is that kept? Because that there's a lot of content in some of the data, beneficiary change forms, ID numbers, investment switches, etc. So training your staff and your teams who manage data is really important. And then backup and recovery processes. I cannot stress how important that is and how easy it is to actually set up, right? The laptop got stolen from my car when I went to Woolworths, or the likes. Backup and recovery is really important so that you can recover from an incident, even if you were attacked. You've got that in place. So those are the frameworks that I would put in place to ensure that you can only try your best when it comes to protecting yourself. And modern advice practices need to have this in place.
Oh, awesome. Maybe just in 30 seconds, if you can, like this is now that elevator pitch kind of situation, Nevashan. The digital advisor, can you just maybe are you able to help people with this? What should they do if they want to know more about what they can do to protect themselves, their business, and their clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Franz, I know we've taken the risk lens to this, but I'm a huge fan of AI. AI is going to fundamentally rewrite many, many careers, many, many parts, many, many industries. And the opportune time now for advisors to rewrite how advice works in that world has come. You can do it really fancy. That's what we do at Digital Advisor. I'm a huge AI fan, helping customers securely curate how they implement AI to improve their customer experience and improve the value of their firms. That's something that we're heavily focused on. Like I mentioned to you, we're working now with a number of accountants, with a number of financial advice practices and people in the SME space. And you find that whereas it was a very difficult and distinct thing that was reserved only for the big, large firms, or it was really expensive for a small firm to implement, the world's become democratized now from a technology perspective. AI is driving that and vendors are responding to that. So you don't really have to worry from a cost perspective. It's a cost of doing business, and you will save those costs elsewhere. That's what we're focused on, helping our clients curate and drive in the world. So Digital Advisor does that, and I'm sure we can share the details with your viewers.
Yeah, awesome. If you want, you can follow Nevashan on LinkedIn as well. He is on there, and you can get in touch in that sense. Nevashan, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really appreciate it. And we wish you well, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Francois, and thank you to listeners, and have a good day.
Thanks very much. All right. Thank you very much. My guest next week, I've got two guests, Derek Notman and Adam Holt. Adam is from Asset Map. You'll probably know him from there. Derek Notman has been very well known for he was one of the very first digital, work from anywhere type of financial advisors. And they're going to be my guest next week. We're going to talk a little bit about a new book that they wrote after interviewing over 100 dads, I think 103 dads, and some of the lessons and things that they learned. So we're going to talk about Rebel Dad and a bit more, other things as well, their journey in business and all of that. So looking forward to that. That's happening next week. So until then, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe, be blessed, and prosper, and stay curious and continue to raise the bar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on PROpulsion. If you found value in today's episode, then there's plenty more where this came from. You can find all our previous episodes right here on the podcast, as well as on our YouTube channel. And talking about the YouTube channel, we go live every single Friday at 8 a.m. until 9 a.m. and we host many different guests, and we also talk about very interesting topics. And on the live show, there's also some incredible segments hosted by some of the most well-known and influential financial planning professionals. So you are most welcome to join us every single Friday. Put it in your diary and we will see you there. And on that note, also please do check out propulsion.co.za/community for all of the goodness and learn more about how you can become part of our amazing community and how that would benefit you, your business, and your career. So on that note, stay curious and keep raising the bar.